She was pushed, silenced, and left in the cold, but she wasn't alone. Her son saw the pain of betrayal in his mother's eyes and vowed justice. At the dinner of truth, everyone's mask began to crumble. If this story piqued your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The rain poured heavily over Winchester that Thursday night, turning the city's wide avenues into dark mirrors, reflecting the lights of street lamps and hurried passing cars. Raphael Alistair drove his imported sedan along the M3 motorway with a growing sense of relief in his chest. 7 days away from home always felt like an eternity, even if the business trip had been productive. The meetings in London had secured important contracts for the family's construction company, but none of that mattered as much as the chance to finally embrace his mother, Lady Eleanor. The name brought an involuntary smile to Raphael's lips every time he thought of her. 78 years of a lifetime dedicated to building, resisting, teaching. She was more than his mother. She was his mentor, his moral compass, the woman who held his hand when his father left, leaving only debts and shame over 30 years ago. Together, mother and son had built an empire from scratch. While Raphael learned about business and contracts, Lady Eleanor handled the accounting, the finances, the difficult decisions no one else would have dared to make. Now, with her health more fragile and confined to a wheelchair after a spinal problem that medicine hadn't been able to fully resolve, Lady Eleanor remained the heart of the Alistair family. Raphael spoke with her every day by phone, but nothing replaced the feeling of being near, of seeing her brown eyes sparkle when he told her about business, of hearing her precise advice on people and decisions. His cell phone rang on the car's speakerphone. It was Camilla, his wife. Raphael answered with a slight sigh, adjusting in his seat as he slowed down due to the rain, which was now falling with even greater intensity. "Hi, love. Are you arriving?" she asked, her voice sounding strangely tense through the speaker. "I'm about 20 minutes away. Traffic is heavy because of the rain. How's my mother?" Raphael replied, his eyes fixed on the wet road ahead. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a pause too long to be natural. "She's fine, resting. You know how she is, always quiet at night," Camilla finally said, but there was something in her voice that Raphael couldn't identify. Nervousness, perhaps, or haste. "Is everything all right there?" he asked, frowning. Everything. I'll wait for you at home. Drive carefully." His wife rushed to answer before hanging up. Raphael stared at the phone for an instant, a strange feeling settling in his stomach. Camilla never hung up so quickly. Usually she would ask about the trip, about his exact arrival, at Heim if he wanted dinner. That conversation had been short, hurried, strange. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thoughts. She was probably tired, or busy with something around the house. There was no reason to worry. He focused on the road, speeding up a little now that traffic was starting to flow better at the city's entrance. The Alistair mansion was located in one of Winchester's most prestigious neighborhoods, an area where enormous houses hid behind high walls and electronic gates. Raphael and Lady Eleanor had bought that property 10 years earlier, when the business finally took off, for good. It was a large house with spacious gardens, a swimming pool, a barbecue area, and even a small orchard in the back. Lady Eleanor loved that place. She used to say that after so long living in cramped apartments, she finally had the garden she had always dreamed of. When Raphael turned onto the mansion's street, the first thing he noticed was the darkness. The house was practically unlit, with only a few faint lights on here and there. Strange. Usually Camilla left all the outdoor lights on, and Lady Eleanor liked to keep the living room lit, late, watching her television dramas or reading. The gate opened automatically as the car approached. Raphael drove in slowly, the tires making noise in the accumulated water at the entrance. The rain had slowed to a fine drizzle, but the wind remained strong, swaying the garden trees and making leaves dance on the wet ground. He parked the car in the garage and took his suitcase from the trunk. He was eager to go inside, change out of his travel clothes, hug his mother, and finally rest. But when he opened the door that led to the utility room and kitchen, he was met by absolute silence. "Camilla!" he called, dropping his suitcase on the floor. "Mother!" No answer. The silence of the house was oppressive, almost palpable. Raphael walked through the kitchen, noticing it was clean, tidy, but empty. No sign that anyone had dined there. No dishes in the sink, no smell of food. He passed through the living room, turning on lights as he went. Everything was in place, furniture tidy, cushions aligned on the sofa. But there was no one. He went upstairs to the second floor, his heart starting to beat faster in his chest. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Camilla!" he called again, louder this time. "Luke!" Luke was his younger brother, 10 years Raphael's junior. They all lived together in the mansion, a decision Lady Eleanor had insisted upon to keep the family united. Luke also worked at the construction company, handling the administrative side while Raphael managed external business. He checked all the upstairs bedrooms. Empty. The beds made, everything tidy, but no one. The room he and Camilla shared was untouched since he had left for London. Luke's room also empty. It was then that Raphael realized something even more disturbing. Where were the staff? Martha, Lady Eleanor's caregiver who slept in the house, should have been there. Joseph, the gardener who also did general maintenance and lived in the back annex, always showed up at night to check if everything was all right. The cook, Mrs. Lucy, usually left dinner ready before leaving, but the kitchen was completely empty. The entire house was empty. Raphael felt panic begin to rise in his throat. He ran down the stairs, almost tripping on the last steps. He checked Lady Eleanor's suite on the ground floor, a spacious and adapted room they had built, especially for her, with grab bars, an accessible bathroom, and a private veranda overlooking the garden. The door was ajar. "Mother!" he called, pushing the door fully open. The room was empty. The bed, perfectly made. The wheelchair was not in its usual place beside the bed. Panic turned into pure terror. Raphael ran through the entire house again, this time shouting, turning on all the lights, opening all the doors. He checked the bathrooms, the pantry, the office, the game room. Nothing. No one. The house was completely deserted, as if everyone had simply vanished. It was then that he heard it, a faint sound, almost imperceptible beneath the noise of the wind and drizzle outside. A moan, low, muffled, coming from somewhere outside. Raphael ran to the door leading to the back garden and flung it open. The veranda at the back of the house, the one connecting Lady Eleanor's room to the garden, was faintly lit by the light coming from the living room. And that's where he saw her. His mother. Lady Eleanor was lying on the wet veranda floor beside her overturned wheelchair. Her small, fragile body was curled up, her clothes soaked by the rain, her grey hair plastered to her face. One of her legs was at a completely wrong angle, bent in a way that made Raphael's stomach churn. And there was blood. Dried blood on her forehead, mixed with the rainwater trickling across the stone floor. "Mother!" Raphael screamed, rushing to her and kneeling beside her. Lady Eleanor was breathing, but her eyes were closed. Her face was pale, her lips almost purple. When Raphael touched her skin, she was ice cold. Too cold. "Mother, wake up, Mother, please," he begged, taking off his jacket and placing it over her, trying to warm her somehow. He grabbed his cell phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number. "I need an ambulance. Urgent. My mother is down, injured. I don't know for how long. She's freezing. Please, come quickly," he told the operator, his voice strangled, giving the address while caressing his mother's face. The minutes that followed were the longest of Raphael's life. He stayed there, kneeling on the wet ground, holding Lady Eleanor's cold hand, talking to her, pleading for her to hold on. He tried not to move her injured leg, but covered her body with everything he could find. Towels, blankets, his own jacket. "You're going to be okay, Mother. The ambulance is coming. I'm here. I won't leave you alone ever again," he whispered, tears mixing with the drizzle on his face. When the ambulance finally arrived, Raphael was in a state of shock. The paramedics worked quickly, immobilizing Lady Eleanor's leg, administering oxygen, checking her vital signs. Raphael followed them to the ambulance, getting in with his mother, holding her hand throughout the journey to the hospital. In the emergency room of St. Michael's Hospital, one of Winchester's best, Lady Eleanor was immediately taken to the trauma room. Raphael waited outside, pacing the corridor, his clothes still wet, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. It was only then, as he waited for news, that shock began to give way to anger. Where was Camilla? Where was Luke? Where on earth were all the staff? How had his mother ended up on that veranda, fallen, alone, in the rain? How long had she been there, suffering, waiting for help that didn't come? Raphael took out his cell phone and called Camilla. The call went straight to voicemail. He called Luke. Same thing. He tried Martha, the caregiver, nothing. Joseph, the gardener. Phone switched off. A grim premonition began to form in Raphael's mind. This wasn't a common accident. It couldn't be. His mother didn't go out to the veranda alone at night. She always called someone to help her. And even if she had gone out alone and fallen, where was everyone? Why had no one found her? Why was the house empty? Mr. Alistair, a young doctor in a white coat and with a serious expression, approached him. Raphael stood up immediately. "How is she?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Your mother suffered a femoral fracture which will require surgery. There's also a mild head trauma, but we performed a CT scan and there's no internal bleeding. What concerns us most is hypothermia. Based on her vital signs and body temperature when she arrived, we estimate she was exposed to the cold and rain for at least 3 to 4 hours, the doctor explained, checking the clipboard in her hands. 3 to 4 hours, Raphael repeated, feeling bile rise in his throat. She was there for hours, alone, suffering. We'll admit her and perform the surgery early, tomorrow morning. For now we are stabilizing her vital signs and slowly warming her body. You can see her for a few minutes, but she hasn't fully regained consciousness yet," the doctor continued. Raphael followed her to the room where Lady Eleanor had been admitted. When he entered and saw his mother in that hospital bed, so small and fragile under the blankets, connected to wires and tubes, his heart broke. He approached slowly and took her hand, which was now warmer but still very pale. "I'm here, Mother. You're safe now. I'm going to find out what happened. I promise," he whispered, leaning in to kiss her forehead. It was then that he noticed something that made his blood run cold, the expression on Lady Eleanor's face. Even unconscious, even under the effect of medication, there was something there. A tension, a trace of frozen fear in the lines around her closed eyes and slightly open mouth. It was as if, even in sleep, she was still trapped in a moment of terror. Raphael stayed there for a while longer, just holding his mother's hand, watching the rise and fall of her chest, the regular beat of the heart. Monitors. When he finally left the room, it was almost midnight. In the corridor, he tried to call Camilla and Luke again. Nothing. He decided to go back home. He needed to understand what had happened. He needed to find answers. When he arrived back at the mansion, the lights he had left on were still lit. The house remained empty and silent. Raphael walked to the veranda where he had found his mother. Under the strong light he had now turned on, he examined the spot carefully. The wheelchair was overturned as if it had been knocked over forcefully. There were drag marks on the wet floor, as if someone had pushed the chair. And then Raphael saw something that made his fists clench. On the edge of the ramp that led to the veranda, there were recent marks, scratches on the wood, as if something had been dragged or pushed with violence. He took out his cell phone and photographed everything. The marks, the position of the chair, the blood still visible on the floor even after the rain. He didn't know exactly why he was doing it, but some instinct told him he would need that evidence. It was then that he heard the sound of a key in the front door. Raphael turned quickly and walked back inside the house. Camilla was entering, followed by Luke. Both stopped when they saw Raphael there, frozen as if caught red-handed. "Raphael," Camilla said, her voice failing. "You're back." "Where were you?" Raphael asked, his voice so cold, so controlled, that even he was surprised. "My mother was lying on the veranda, alone for hours." "Where were you?" Camilla paled. Luke took a step back. There was a moment of tense silence before Camilla finally spoke. "Raphael, it was an accident. Your mother wanted to go to the equestrian center this afternoon. You know how she loves to see the horses. Luke and I took her, but she tripped on the ramp there. She fell. We didn't think it was serious, so we brought her back. She said she wanted to rest. We went out to sort some things, and when we came back you were already here, she explained quickly, nervously wringing her hands. You took her to the equestrian center? Raphael repeated, his jaw tight. She fell. You brought her home and then you left her alone. On the veranda, fallen, injured, and left. It wasn't like that, Luke tried to interject. We didn't know it was so serious. We thought it was just a minor fall. And the staff? Where's Martha? Where's Joseph? Where is everyone? Raphael continued, taking a step towards them. Martha asked for time off, Camilla said, but her voice was trembling. Joseph went to visit family in the countryside. The cook had already left. It was bad luck, Raphael. A series of unfortunate coincidences. Raphael looked at his wife, then at his brother. Something was wrong with that story. Very wrong. The pieces didn't fit. If his mother had fallen at the equestrian center, why was there blood on the house's veranda? Why was the wheelchair overturned there? Why hadn't they taken Lady Eleanor to the hospital immediately if she had fallen? She's in the hospital now, Raphael said, observing their reactions. Femoral fracture, head trauma, hypothermia. The doctors said she was exposed to the cold for hours. Hours, Camilla. My God, Camilla put a hand to her mouth. Is she going to be okay? She will, but not thanks to you, Raphael replied, anger finally beginning to leak through his controlled voice. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow morning I'm going back to the hospital, and when my mother recovers, she'll tell me exactly what happened. He turned and went upstairs, leaving Camilla and Luke standing in the living room. He locked himself in the guest room and sat on the bed, his head in his hands. He couldn't stop thinking about the image of his mother lying on that veranda, alone, cold, in pain, waiting for help. And he couldn't stop thinking about the expression of frozen terror on her face. The next morning, Raphael woke up early, despite having slept little. He took a quick shower, changed clothes, and went straight to the hospital. He didn't cross paths with Camilla or Luke. Better that way. He didn't trust himself to remain calm if he saw them at that moment. At the hospital, he found Lady Eleanor awake. She was pale, her eyes tired, but conscious. When she saw Raphael enter the room, her eyes filled with tears. Son, she whispered, her voice weak. I'm here, Mother. I'm here, Raphael said, rushing to the bed and holding her hand. You're safe now, I'll take care of everything. Lady Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come out. She seemed to be struggling against something, as if the words were stuck in her throat. Raphael saw the frustration in her eyes, and his heart tightened. You don't need to speak now. You need to rest. The surgery is soon. After you recover, we'll talk, he said, caressing his mother's hair. But Lady Eleanor weakly shook her head, squeezing her son's hand. There was urgency in that gesture, something she needed to tell him, something important. It was then that the room door opened and Camilla entered. Raphael hadn't seen her arrive. When his eyes landed on his wife, he noticed she was carrying flowers and wore an expression of studied concern on her face. Lady Eleanor, how are you? I was so worried, Camilla said, approaching the bed. And it was at that moment that Raphael saw something that made his world stop. Lady Eleanor, upon seeing Camilla approach, had a visceral reaction. Her eyes widened, her whole body stiffened, and she tried to move away in the bed, pushing herself against the pillows as if trying to escape. A muffled sound of panic escaped her throat. Raphael immediately stood up, placing himself between Camilla and his mother. He looked at Lady Eleanor, who was now breathing with difficulty, her eyes still fixed on Camilla, and then looked at his wife. Camilla took a step back, the flowers still in her hands, the expression of shock on her face seeming genuine. But there was something else there, something in her eyes. Fear. I think it's best you leave, Raphael said, his voice low but firm. Raphael, I just came to see how she is, Camilla protested. Leave, he repeated, and this time there was no room for a discussion in his tone. Camilla hesitated for a moment, then placed the flowers on a table beside the door and left the room without looking back. Raphael turned to his mother, who was still tense, her eyes now filled with tears. It was her, wasn't it? Raphael asked in a low voice, holding his mother's face in his hands. Camilla did this to you." Lady Eleanor closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her wrinkled face. It was answer enough. Raphael felt something inside him break and reconfigure at the same time. The anger he had felt the night before was nothing compared to what he felt now, but along with the anger came a cold, sharp clarity. He wasn't just going to uncover the truth, he was going to get justice. The right way. "I'll sort this out, Mother. You can trust me," he promised, kissing her forehead. He stayed with Lady Eleanor until the medical team came to take her for surgery. While waiting in the corridor during the procedure, Raphael called his private solicitor, Maurice, a competent and discreet man who had worked with the family for years. "Maurice, I need your help, and I need you to be discreet," Raphael said when the solicitor answered. "Of course, Raphael, what happened?" Maurice asked, concerned. "My mother was attacked. I'm at the hospital now. She's going to recover, but I need help investigating. I need a private investigator, the best one you know. Someone who knows how to be invisible," Raphael explained. "I understand. I'll arrange it. Anything else?" "Yes. I need you to check all my wife's financial movements over the last 3 months, bank accounts, transfers, everything. And my brothers too. Can you do this without them knowing?" Raphael asked. There was a pause. On the other end of the line, Maurice was smart enough not to ask unnecessary questions. "I'll start today. Are you all right, Raphael? Do you need anything else?" "I am. And thank you, Maurice. I'll send you more details by email. And remember, total discretion. Always." Raphael hung up and stood looking out the corridor window, observing the city below. Winchester went about its normal routine. Cars passed along the avenues, people walked on the pavements, life went on. But for him, everything had changed. The trust he had in his wife, in his brother, in the family structure he thought was solid, had been shaken to its foundations. But he was Lady Eleanor Alistair's son, and if there was one thing she had taught him throughout all those years of building an empire from scratch, it was that patience and strategy always triumphed over impulsiveness and blind rage. He would discover exactly what had happened. He would piece together every part of the puzzle, and when he had all the necessary evidence, he would ensure that those responsible paid for every second of suffering they had caused his mother. The surgery lasted 3 hours. When the doctor finally emerged from the room and reported that everything had gone well, that Lady Eleanor was stable and would be taken for recovery, Raphael felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. She would survive. She would recover. And she would have the chance to see justice done. Raphael spent the rest of the day at the hospital, refusing all calls from Camilla and Luke. When he finally returned home that night, a plan was already forming in his mind, a plan that required patience, control, and, above all, the ability to pretend that nothing had changed while beneath the surface, he prepared the final blow. Because if there was one thing Raphael Alistair knew how to do very well, learned from years of business and difficult negotiations, it was to play the long game. And this time, the stakes couldn't be higher. It wasn't just about money or business. It was about justice for the woman who had given him everything. It was about protecting the only person in the world who truly mattered. And Raphael was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. The days following Lady Eleanor's surgery were marked by a carefully calculated routine. Raphael divided his time between the hospital and the construction company, maintaining an appearance of normalcy, while inside, every fiber of his being was on high alert. At home, he treated Camilla with cold but polite cordiality. With Luke, he kept conversations brief and work-related. No one would suspect that anything had changed, that behind those calm eyes and controlled demeanor, Raphael was meticulously assembling each piece of a puzzle that promised to reveal devastating truths. Maurice, his solicitor, worked quickly. Within 3 days, he had hired a private investigator named Robert Anderson, a former federal police officer with an impeccable reputation and a remarkable ability to remain invisible while gathering information. Robert was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance who easily blended into crowds, exactly the perfect type of person for that job. They met in a discreet cafe in central Winchester, far from the places where Raphael was usually recognized. Robert listened attentively as Raphael recounted everything, from the moment he found his mother fallen on the veranda to Lady Eleanor's panic reaction upon seeing Camilla at the hospital. "It's a delicate case," Robert said, taking a sip of black coffee. "We're talking about members of your family. Are you sure you want to go all the way with this?" "I am," Raphael replied without hesitation. "My mother was almost lost because of whatever happened. I need to know the full truth. And I need evidence." Robert nodded, taking a small notebook from his pocket. "I'll need some information. Your wife's and brother's phone numbers, car license plates, daily routines. I'll also need access to the house to install discreet surveillance equipment." "That can be arranged," Raphael said, pulling out his cell phone and starting to pass on the information. As Robert jotted everything down, Raphael couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He was spying on his own wife, his own brother, but then the image of Lady Eleanor fallen on that veranda returned to his mind, and the guilt gave way to cold determination. "One more thing," Robert said, putting away the notebook. "From what you told me, your mother was alone in the house for hours before you arrived. We need to find out where all the staff were. One person might have an unforeseen event, but everyone disappearing at the same time is too suspicious." "I've thought about that too. Martha, the caregiver, still hasn't shown up. Joseph, the gardener, has also disappeared. No one answers my calls," Raphael explained. "I'll investigate. Sometimes people know things but are afraid to speak. I'll find them and see what they have to say." In the following days, Robert began his silent work. He installed micro cameras and listening devices at strategic points in the mansion, always when Camilla and Luke were out. The cameras were so small and discreet that it would be impossible to notice them without knowing exactly where to look. Raphael felt like a stranger in his own home, but he knew it was necessary. Meanwhile, Maurice delivered the first results of the financial investigation, and what Raphael read in the report made his blood run cold. Over the past 2 months, Camilla had made a series of suspicious transfers, small amounts, nothing that would individually draw much attention, but which totaled almost £200,000. The money had been moved from joint accounts she had access to into an account in the name of a shell company, registered at a commercial address in the city centre. But what truly shocked Raphael was another discovery. 3 days before Lady Eleanor's accident, Camilla had initiated the process of transferring 2 properties that were in her mother-in-law's name. These were 2 apartments in upscale Winchester neighbourhoods that Lady Eleanor had bought as an investment years ago. Camilla had obtained the necessary powers of attorney, something that could only have been done with Lady Eleanor's signature. "How did she manage that?" Raphael asked Maurice by phone, locked in his office at the construction company. "Apparently, your mother signed the powers of attorney about 3 weeks ago." "But Raphael, looking at the documents, the signature seems off. It might have been done under duress or when she was medicated," Maurice explained. "Can you arrange a forensic handwriting analysis?" "I'm already doing so, but it will take a few days." Raphael hung up and stood looking out his office window, his hands clenched into fists. The plan was revealing itself little by little. Camilla was systematically transferring Lady Eleanor's assets to herself, and she had done this exactly before the accident. It wasn't a coincidence. It was premeditation. At the hospital, Lady Eleanor showed signs of gradual improvement. The surgery had been successful, and she was starting physical therapy. But there was a persistent problem. She still had extreme difficulty speaking. Doctors explained it could be a temporary effect of the trauma, a kind of psychological block caused by shock and fear. Raphael saw the frustration in his mother's eyes every time she tried to say something, and the words simply wouldn't come out. "Don't worry, Mother. You don't need to speak. I'm finding out everything myself," he would say, holding her hand. And it was true. With each passing day, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Robert managed to locate Joseph, the gardener. The man was hiding at a cousin's house in a remote Winchester neighbourhood. It took some persuasion, but Robert finally convinced him to speak. The story Joseph told was revealing. On the day of the accident, Camilla had arrived home in the early afternoon and dismissed all the staff, saying that Lady Eleanor wasn't feeling well and needed absolute quiet. She insisted that everyone take the day off, which was unusual. Martha, the caregiver, resisted a little, but Luke supported Camilla, and practically ordered her to leave. Joseph had left, but felt uncomfortable with the situation. He returned in the late afternoon, hidden, just to check if everything was all right. That's when he saw something that deeply frightened him. From the back gate, through the bushes, he saw Camilla and Luke taking Lady Eleanor to the veranda. The lady seemed to resist, trying to hold onto the wheelchair's wheels, but they pushed her forcefully. Joseph couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw when Camilla simply turned the chair, and Lady Eleanor fell to the ground. He was paralyzed with fear. Then he saw Luke and Camilla enter the house, leaving Lady Eleanor lying there. Joseph didn't know what to do. He was afraid that if he reported it, he would lose his job, or worse, something might happen to him. So he fled and hid. "You have to report this to the police," Robert told him. But Joseph was terrified. They were powerful people. He was just a gardener. Who would believe him against the word of wealthy business owners? Robert didn't force him, but he managed to get Joseph to record a video testimony recounting everything he saw. It was valuable evidence, even if it couldn't be used officially without Joseph agreeing to testify formally. When Raphael watched the video, he had to restrain himself from punching his office wall. His wife and his brother had deliberately injured his mother and left her fallen, suffering. There was no longer any doubt. It wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder. But Raphael knew he needed more. He needed to understand why. What was the motive behind all of this? Money, obviously. But there was something else. Something he still couldn't fully grasp. The answer began to emerge in the second week after the accident. Raphael was in the mansion's living room, pretending to read some company reports when Camilla entered. She had been out during the afternoon and was now returning with bags from a pharmacy. Raphael observed discreetly as she went to the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned to the living room, looking nervous. It was then that he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. Camilla placed a protective hand over her belly, a subtle, unconscious but unmistakable gesture. "Are you feeling well?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. Camilla seemed startled, as if caught doing something wrong. Yes, just a bit nauseous. Must be something I ate," she replied quickly, removing her hand from her belly. "Do you want me to call a doctor?" "No need, it'll pass." But Raphael wasn't foolish. He recognized that gesture. His cousin had done exactly the same when she was pregnant. The instinctive, protective touch that pregnant women have. That night, when Camilla was already asleep, Raphael retrieved the pharmacy bags she had left in the bathroom. Inside, he found exactly what he expected: prenatal vitamins, folic acid, a pregnancy test still in its box. He returned to the guest room where he had been sleeping since the accident, his mind working at maximum speed. If Camilla was pregnant, it changed everything. It added a completely new layer to the puzzle. But something didn't make sense. Raphael and Camilla hadn't been intimate for at least 2 months. He traveled constantly, and when he was home, they slept at different times, and even before that, their intimacy had cooled off long ago. If she was pregnant and it wasn't his, then whose was it? The answer came 3 days later, through the surveillance cameras Robert had installed. Raphael was in his office at the construction company when he received a notification on his cell phone. It was from one of the cameras in the mansion's living room, programmed to alert him when it detected movement during the hours he was normally not home. He opened the app, and what he saw on the small phone screen made his entire body tense. Luke and Camilla were in the living room. But they weren't just talking, they were embracing. Very close, too intimate to be just in-laws. Raphael turned up the volume, thanks to the microphone embedded in the camera. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Luke's voice came through clearly on the audio. "I am. He's so focused on taking care of his mother that he doesn't even notice what's happening around him," Camilla replied, her head resting on Luke's shoulder. "And the baby?" "Our baby is fine. I had the ultrasound yesterday. 8 weeks. Raphael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. 8 weeks. Exactly the period he had been traveling constantly to London, closing contracts. The period he had left Luke in charge of some matters in Winchester. The period during which, apparently, his brother and his wife had been building a relationship that went far beyond what it should. "We need to be careful," Luke continued. "If he finds out about us, about the baby, everything will fall apart." "He won't find out. We'll continue as planned. With the old woman out of the way and him focused on taking care of her, we have time," Camilla said, and there was a coldness in her voice that Raphael had never heard before. "Do you think she'll say anything?" "She can't. The doctor said she has a psychological block. It might take months until she can speak properly again. And when she does, who will believe an elderly lady, confused? Possibly with memory problems because of the trauma. We'll just say, 'She's delirious,'" Camilla replied with a calmness that made Raphael's blood boil. Luke laughed, a low, cruel sound. "You're smarter than I thought. I know how to look after my interests. And our future," she said, turning to kiss him. Raphael closed the app. He couldn't watch anymore. He got up from his chair and went to the office window, his hands trembling with contained rage. His brother, his own brother, and his wife, together, conspiring not only against him, but against his mother. They had intentionally harmed Lady Eleanor, leaving her to suffer, all part of some larger plan. That Raphael was still trying to fully understand. He picked up the phone and called Robert. "I need you here now. I have something you need to see." An hour later, Robert was sitting in Raphael's office, watching the recording of the conversation between Luke and Camilla. When the video ended, the investigator remained silent for a long moment. "This is serious, Raphael. Very serious. We have evidence of conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder," Robert finally said. "I know, but I still don't understand the full picture. Why do all this? What do they have to gain?" Robert opened the folder he had brought with him and spread several documents across the table. "I've investigated further. Your brother is in serious debt, gambling mostly. He owes almost £1 million to loan sharks and betting houses. And Camilla, well, she's been spending far beyond what the allowance you give her permits. Designer clothes, jewelry, trips when you're not around." Raphael picked up one of the documents and read it carefully. Luke's bank statements showed regular transfers to online betting sites, to known loan sharks in the city. How had he not seen this before? "You always traveled a lot, handled external business. You left internal matters to them. It was easy to hide," Robert said, as if reading Raphael's thoughts. "And my mother. Did she discover this?" Robert nodded. "I spoke with your construction company's accountant. Your mother, weeks before the accident, asked her to conduct an audit of internal expenses. Apparently, Lady Eleanor had noticed some inconsistencies. The accountant was preparing a detailed report to present to her. The report was ready exactly 1 day before the accident." Raphael felt as if the pieces were finally falling into place. Lady Eleanor had discovered the irregularities. She had discovered that Luke was embezzling money, that Camilla was spending uncontrollably. And when she confronted them, they decided to silence her in the cruelest way possible. They pushed her, hurt her, left her there, hoping she wouldn't survive or, at least, would be incapacitated from speaking, Raphael said in a low voice, the full realization of what had happened finally settling in. "And with you focused on taking care of her, they would have time to continue embezzling money, consolidate the property transfers, and eventually, when the baby was born, Camilla would have a guarantee of inheritance through the child," Robert completed. But there was more. Robert showed him other documents, recordings of phone calls Luke had made, captured through the monitoring they had installed. In one of them, Luke was talking to someone about a plan. "If he suspects everything, accidents happen. Businessmen live stressed, any car crash at night," Luke's voice said in the recording. And Camilla's response, "But he still loves his mother. It was necessary to get her out of the way first. That way he becomes vulnerable, focused on that, and doesn't pay attention to the rest." Raphael listened to the recording 3 times. It wasn't just about money. It was a plan to eventually get him out of the way too. First the mother, then him. And with both out of the picture, Luke and Camilla would inherit everything. The empire that Lady Eleanor and Raphael had built with so much sweat and sacrifice. "What do you want to do?" Robert asked. Raphael remained silent for a long moment, his thoughts racing. The rage within him was a volcano about to erupt, but he knew he couldn't act impulsively. He had to be smart, strategic, the way his mother had taught him. "I want more evidence. I want everything documented, recorded, impossible to refute. And I want to choose the right moment to expose everything," Raphael finally said. "This could be dangerous. If they suspect you know, they might try something drastic." "I know. That's why I need to continue acting normally. I need to make them believe I'm completely oblivious. I'll even pretend I'm starting to accept their version of events." "It's risky, but it's necessary," Raphael insisted. In the following days, Raphael put his plan into action. At home, he began to treat Camilla with more affection, asking how she was feeling, making comments about how happy he was that things were returning to normal. With Luke, he resumed discussing business, asking for advice, including him more in the company's decisions. Camilla and Luke let their guard down. They thought they had won, that Raphael was too absorbed caring for his mother to notice what was happening around him. But Raphael saw everything, every glance exchanged between them, every discreet touch, every lie told with smiles on their faces, and he stored each of these pieces of information, accumulating evidence, waiting for the right moment. It was then that Camilla made the announcement. One evening during dinner, she placed her hand over Raphael's and smiled with an expression that tried to appear shy and happy. "Raphael, I have some news. I'm pregnant." Raphael feigned surprise, happiness. He stood up and hugged her, while Luke watched from the other side of the table with a carefully neutral expression. "That's wonderful," Raphael said, and his performance was perfect. Inside, he felt nauseous. "I thought you'd be happy," Camilla said, and Raphael could have sworn he saw a glimmer of triumph in her eyes. "I am. We're going to have a child. It's what we always wanted," he said, maintaining his smile. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Raphael left the house and went to a viewpoint in the South Downs National Park on the outskirts of Winchester. He stood there, looking at the city lights below, letting the mask drop for a moment, letting the anger, the pain, the feeling of betrayal finally come to the surface. But along with these emotions also came a cold and unwavering resolve. He wasn't just going to expose Luke and Camilla. He was going to do it in a way that they could never escape. In a way that all of Winchester society, all their acquaintances, all their business partners, would see exactly what kind of people they were. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Robert. "I have more information. Important. Can we meet tomorrow?" Raphael typed the reply. "Yes. Early morning. Usual spot." He put his phone away and stayed there for a few more minutes, in the silence of the night, planning every step of what was to come. Lady Eleanor was slowly improving in the hospital. She still couldn't speak properly, but she was stronger, more lucid. And Raphael saw in her eyes a mixture of pain and pride. Pain for what she had suffered, but pride for the son who was handling everything so controlled and strategically. "You taught me well, Mother. You taught me that revenge served cold is always more effective," Raphael thought, turning to go back to his car. He had a long road ahead, but every step was being carefully calculated. And when the time came, when all the pieces were finally in place, Raphael would ensure that justice was served, not just for the crimes Luke and Camilla had committed, but for every tear Lady Eleanor had shed, for every second of pain she had faced on that cold, dark veranda. The storm was brewing, and when it finally broke over Luke and Camilla, there would be nowhere to hide. The following month was an emotional roller coaster disguised as routine. Raphael woke up every morning, put on the mask of normalcy, and played the role of a dedicated husband and trusting brother with a precision that would surprise even the best actors. But behind this carefully constructed facade, every cell of his body was on high alert, every thought focused on a single objective: gathering enough evidence to completely destroy the charade Camilla and Luke had created. Lady Eleanor was discharged from the hospital after 3 weeks. Her leg was still in a cast, and she would need months of physical therapy, but the doctors were impressed with her recovery. The head trauma had healed well, with no permanent sequelae. The only persistent problem was the difficulty in speaking, although this was also slowly improving, word by word, syllable by syllable. Raphael converted one of the mansion's ground-floor rooms into a fully adapted space for his mother. He hired a new caregiver, a woman named Antonia, who came highly recommended and who, more importantly, had no prior connection to Camilla or Luke. Robert had thoroughly investigated her background. She was someone Raphael could trust. Camilla, of course, protested against hiring Antonia. She claimed she could care for her mother-in-law herself, that they didn't need a stranger in the house. But Raphael was firm, using her pregnancy as an excuse. "You need to rest. Think about the baby. You can't be lifting weights or stressing yourself taking care of my mother. Antonia is a professional. She knows exactly what to do," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Camilla had no choice but to accept, although Raphael could see the thinly disguised frustration on her face. She had lost direct access to Lady Eleanor, and that was exactly what Raphael wanted. The cameras and microphones scattered throughout the house continued to capture revealing conversations. Robert had set up a sophisticated system that allowed Raphael to access the recordings from anywhere via his cell phone or computer. It was like having a direct window into the lies and conspiracies happening in his own home. One afternoon, while in a meeting at the construction company, Raphael received a notification. It was from the camera in Luke's office, located on the mansion's second floor. Discreetly, during a break in the meeting, Raphael stepped out and checked the recording in the restroom. Luke was on the phone, his voice tense and worried. "I know I'm late with the payment. I just need 2 more weeks. I have a plan," he was saying, pacing his office. The reply from the other end couldn't be heard, but from Luke's reaction, it was nothing good. No, please. I'll get the money. Just don't do anything rash. My brother is starting to trust me again. He's going to give me control of some accounts. I just need time," Luke pleaded. A few more seconds of silence as he listened. "All right. 2 weeks, I promise. You'll have your money," Luke said finally, and when he hung up the phone, his hands were trembling. Raphael saved the recording and returned to the meeting, but his mind was working in another direction. Luke was desperate, and desperate people were predictable. It was only a matter of time until they made a wrong move. Robert managed to locate Martha, Lady Eleanor's former caregiver. She was living with her sister in a neighboring town, Alton, about 30 miles from Winchester. It took some effort to convince her to speak, but when she finally did, the story she told added a dark layer to everything Raphael already knew. Martha had worked for the family for almost 3 years. She was dedicated to Lady Eleanor, treating her not just as a boss, but with genuine affection. In the weeks leading up to the accident, she had noticed changes in Camilla's and Luke's behavior. They would whisper in corners, stop talking when Martha entered the room, and have quiet conversations they didn't want anyone to hear. But what truly alarmed Martha was a conversation she accidentally overheard about a week before the accident. She was in the second-floor hallway, putting away clean clothes, when she heard voices coming from Luke's room. The door was ajar. It was Camilla and Luke, and they were discussing Lady Eleanor. "She knows too much," Camilla had said. "That meddling old woman isn't content to just stay quiet. Now she wants to audit everything, control everything. She's always been like that, controlling, thinks she knows everything," Luke had replied, his voice full of resentment. "We need to do something before she tells Raphael everything. If he finds out about the money, about the transfers, we're screwed." "And what do you suggest? We can't just make her disappear," Luke had said. "No, but we can make her seem confused, incapacitated. If she suffered an accident, something that affected her head, made her confused, ill, no one would take what she said seriously." Martha had frozen in the hallway, her blood chilling in her veins. They were planning to harm Lady Eleanor. When she finally managed to move, she quietly returned to her room and spent the night awake, trying to decide what to do. The next day, she tried to talk to Lady Eleanor, subtly suggesting she be careful with Camilla and Luke. But before she could say anything more direct, Camilla appeared and dismissed Martha for the rest of the day, claiming the lady needed to rest. That was the last day Martha saw Lady Eleanor healthy. The next day, when she tried to return to work, Luke was waiting for her at the gate. He said they no longer needed her services, that Lady Eleanor had decided she no longer wanted a caregiver. He offered her 3 months' salary as compensation if she left immediately and asked no questions. Martha, scared and unsure what to do, accepted the money and left. But she had carried the guilt ever since. She should have insisted. She should have gone to the police. She should have done something to protect Lady Eleanor. When she finished telling her story to Robert, Martha was crying. I abandoned her. That sweet lady who never treated me badly, who was always kind to me. And I abandoned her when she needed me most, she sobbed. Robert managed to convince her to record a video testimony, recounting everything. Another piece of evidence to add to Raphael's growing collection. Meanwhile, Raphael maintained appearances. He took Camilla on romantic dinners, bought her gifts, asked about her pregnancy. He discussed business with Luke, even began including him in more important construction company meetings. In everyone's eyes, the Alistair family was more united than ever, together overcoming the trauma of Lady Eleanor's accident. But in his secret meetings with Robert and Maurice, Raphael was a different person, focused, cold, calculating. Every move by Camilla and Luke was monitored, every conversation recorded, every financial transaction tracked. It was Maurice who brought the most shocking news. The forensic handwriting analysis of the property transfer documents had been completed. The signatures were forgeries. Good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Camilla had hired someone to forge Lady Eleanor's signature. This is document forgery fraud. Added to the rest, we have grounds to prosecute them criminally for multiple crimes, Maurice said, showing the technical report. But Raphael didn't just want prosecutions. He wanted something bigger. He wanted the whole world to know exactly what kind of people Camilla and Luke were. It was then that the idea began to form, in his mind. A public event. Grand. Something that would bring together all of Winchester's elite, journalists, business partners, family friends. A special occasion where no one would expect anything to go wrong. And then, in the midst of it all, Raphael would expose the truth so dramatically and incontestably that Camilla and Luke would have nowhere to run, no way to deny or distort the facts. It's going to be a dinner, Raphael told Robert and Maurice in one of their secret meetings. A gala dinner to celebrate my mother's recovery and announce a substantial donation from the construction company to a charity. I'll invite everyone, the press, our partners, local authorities. Camilla and Luke won't be able to refuse without raising suspicion. And that's where you'll expose everything, Robert said, understanding immediately. Exactly. With everyone watching, with cameras recording, no possibility of denial or escape. It's risky. They might try something before that if they suspect, Maurice warned. That's why we'll make it seem like a last-minute thing. I'll announce the dinner only 2 weeks in advance, enough time to organize everything, but not enough for them to plot something. Preparations began. Raphael hired a top-tier event company, choosing one of Winchester's most prestigious venues, the Cedarwood Manor, a place known for hosting the most exclusive events of the county's elite. The guest list was carefully curated: business owners, politicians, journalists from the region's main publications, photographers, even some local celebrities. The theme would be a celebration of life and resilience in honor of Lady Eleanor. Raphael made it clear to everyone that his mother would be the guest of honor of the evening, the family matriarch who had survived a terrible accident and was now recovering with strength and dignity. Camilla loved the idea. She saw it as an opportunity to appear, to be photographed, to be in the spotlight as the pregnant wife of the successful businessman. Luke also seemed excited, seeing the event as a golden chance to network and impress important people. Neither of them suspected it would be the night of their downfall. Lady Eleanor, meanwhile, was growing stronger by the day. Her speech was slowly returning, still slow and sometimes confused, but it was coming back. And in the moment she was alone with Raphael, during physical therapy exercises or quiet dinners in her room, away from Camilla and Luke, she could communicate a lot through her eyes, her gestures, the few words she could pronounce. "Son," she said one night, holding Raphael's hand with surprising strength. "Be careful." "I know, Mother. I am being careful. Trust me." Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She trusted him. She always had. They will pay for what they did to you. I promise, Raphael whispered, kissing his mother's forehead. 2 weeks before the dinner, Raphael called a family meeting. It was time to make Camilla and Luke believe they were finally safe, that the danger had passed. They gathered in the living room. Lady Eleanor was in her wheelchair, Antonia nearby but discreet. Camilla was sitting on the sofa, her hand frequently going to her already slightly rounded belly. Luke was leaning against the fireplace, trying to appear casual. I wanted to talk to you about something important, Raphael began, standing in the center of the room. These past few months have been difficult for all of us. My mother's accident, her recovery, all the stress. I know it hasn't been easy. Camilla and Luke exchanged a quick, cautious glance, but looking back at everything we've been through, I realized something. I realized the importance of family, of being together, of supporting each other, and I want you to know that I acknowledge everything you've done. Camilla, you were there, even pregnant and dealing with your own difficulties. Luke, you held the construction company together while I was focused on the hospital. You both proved that I can trust you. Raphael paused, observing their reactions. He saw relief begin to appear on their faces, the tension in their shoulders easing. That's why I've decided to make some changes. Luke, I'm going to give you a larger stake in the company, 20% of the shares, and I'm going to include you as an effective partner, not just an employee. Luke tried to control his reaction, but Raphael saw the gleam of triumph in his brother's eyes. Raphael, I don't know what to say. Thank you. You won't regret it, Luke said. And you, Camilla. I know my mother's accident was traumatic for you too. I know you blame yourself for not realizing earlier that the fall had been more serious. But I forgive you. There's no blame. It was an accident. And now we'll move forward together, as a family. Camilla was almost crying, although Raphael knew that were tears of relief, not genuine emotion. Thank you, Raphael. You don't know how much this means to me. Lady Eleanor, sitting in her chair, watched everything in silence. When her gaze met Raphael's, he could see that she understood. She understood the game he was playing. Raphael announced the dinner that same night. A grand celebration, he said, to mark the beginning of a new phase for the Alistair family, to honor his mother's strength, to announce a donation of £5 million to institutions caring for the elderly, and secretly, though he didn't say it aloud, to bring justice. The days that followed were frantic. The house was full of people, florists, decorators, event organizers. Camilla immersed herself in the preparations, choosing the perfect dress, deciding on the menu, ensuring every detail was impeccable. Luke was also involved, seeing the event as a golden opportunity. Meanwhile, Raphael was working on a parallel project. With Robert, he put together a multimedia presentation that would be displayed during the dinner. Officially, it was a video tribute to Lady Eleanor, showing old photos, family moments, a celebration of her life. But there was another video. A video that no one besides Raphael, Robert and Maurice knew about. A video with all the evidence, the recordings of conversations between Camilla and Luke, Joseph's testimony, Martha's testimony, proof of document forgery, financial records showing the embezzlement of money. Everything professionally edited, chronologically organized, impossible to deny. Raphael also took other precautions. He contacted the Winchester police station, specifically Detective Patricia Miller, known for her integrity and efficiency. He presented her with a summary of the case and all the evidence. The detective was shocked but professional. Mr. Alistair, this is serious, very serious. We have grounds for arrest warrants here, she said. I know, but I need to do this my way. I need them to be publicly exposed so there's no doubt in anyone's mind about what they did. After that, they're all yours. The detective didn't particularly like the idea, but understood. She agreed to have a team on standby during the dinner, ready to act as soon as Raphael gave the signal. Maurice handled the legal aspects, preparing all the necessary documentation for civil and criminal proceedings. Restraining orders, divorce petitions, lawsuits for fraud, forgery, attempted murder. Everything ready, just waiting for the right moment to be filed. Robert continued to monitor Camilla and Luke's every move. They were confident, almost euphoric. They thought they had won, that Raphael had completely swallowed the accident story, that they were finally free. In one of the last recordings before the dinner, Raphael overheard them talking in Luke's room. "I can't believe it actually worked," Camilla was saying, her voice full of relief. "He forgave us. He believes us. I told you he was predictable. Raphael has always been the forgiving type, who wants to keep the family together. It's a weakness of his," Luke responded. "A weakness we've worked to our advantage, and now with you having a larger stake in the company, we can finally start to stabilize the finances. Pay off your debts. Live well. And when the baby is born, we have a guaranteed inheritance. Even if he ever finds out the child is mine, the baby will already have legal rights." "Do you really think the old woman won't say anything? I mean, she's improving, starting to talk again." There was a pause before Luke responded. "If she starts talking too much, we can always say she's confused, that the accident affected her head. Elderly people get confused. No one will take it seriously. And if they do?" Another pause, longer this time. "Then we'll have to think of another solution, a permanent one." Raphael had to turn off the recording. He couldn't listen anymore. They were talking about his mother as if she were a problem to be eliminated, as if her life had no value whatsoever. But that recording was also valuable, more proof of Camilla and Luke's cruel and calculating nature. The night before the dinner, Raphael visited Lady Eleanor in her room. She was sitting in bed, reading a book with the help of reading glasses. When she saw her son enter, she smiled. "Tomorrow," Raphael said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Tomorrow it all ends." Lady Eleanor put the book aside and took her son's hand. "Be careful," she said, the word coming out slowly but clearly. "I will. I promise. And when it's all over, you'll be free. You'll never have to be afraid again. I love you, son. I love you too, Mother, more than anything." That night, Raphael barely slept. He mentally reviewed the plan 1,000 times. He checked that all the videos were ready, that the sound and image team knew exactly what to do, that Detective Patricia had all the details. Everything was ready. Tomorrow would be the day the truth would come out, the day Camilla and Luke would finally pay for everything they had done. And Raphael was ready. The Cedarwood Manor was dazzling that Saturday night. Golden lights bathed the building's neoclassical facade, while imported cars arrived one after another, dropping off elegantly dressed guests on the red carpet leading to the main entrance. Photographers captured every moment, flashes illuminating the Winchester night like small earthly stars. Raphael had been in the main hall since early, overseeing every detail. The ambiance was impeccable, tables decorated with arrangements of white roses and aromatic candles, soft lighting that created an atmosphere both sophisticated and welcoming, a stage set up with a giant screen for the evening's presentations. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and elaborate canapes. A small orchestra played classical music in a corner of the hall. Everything was perfect, perfectly planned for what was to come. Camilla arrived radiant, wearing a blue silk dress that discreetly accentuated her pregnancy. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, sparkling jewelry on her neck and ears. She smiled at everyone, accepting compliments, posing for photos, the perfect image of the devoted wife and happy future mother. Luke was also impeccable in his tuxedo, his hair perfectly combed, an expensive watch on his wrist. He circulated the hall greeting business partners, making jokes, shaking hands. To any external observer, it was simply another glamorous night for Winchester's elite. But Raphael saw beyond the masks. He saw the disguised nervousness in Camilla's eyes when she looked at the stage. He saw how Luke drank champagne faster than he should, his hand trembling slightly as he held the glass. They were tense, and they should have been. Lady Eleanor arrived last, pushed in her wheelchair by Antonia. Raphael had personally chosen the dress she would wear, a long, dark green velvet gown, elegant and dignified. Her grey hair was styled in soft waves, and she wore the pearl necklace her late husband had given her decades ago. Even fragile, even still recovering, Lady Eleanor had a presence that commanded respect. When she entered the hall, there was a moment of silence followed by respectful applause. Everyone knew the story of the Alistair matriarch, the woman who had built an empire alongside her son, who had survived a terrible accident and was now there, resilient as ever. Raphael approached and kissed his mother's forehead. She looked into his eyes, and in that gaze there was understanding, support, and a quiet strength that only decades of life and struggle can provide. "It's all going to be all right," he whispered. "Tonight, justice will be served." Lady Eleanor squeezed her son's hand and nodded, confident. The dinner began with elegance. Guests were seated at the carefully arranged tables. Raphael sat at the main table along with Lady Eleanor, Camilla, Luke, and some of the region's most important business figures. Conversations flowed, laughter echoed, cutlery clinked against fine porcelain. It was a scene of perfect harmony and prosperity. Between the main course and dessert, Raphael stood up, a discreet signal to the sound team, and the hall began to quieten, all attention turning to the stage where he now walked. "Good evening, everyone," Raphael began, his voice amplified by the strategically positioned microphones. "I want to thank each of you for your presence on this very special evening. We are here to celebrate many things: life, family, resilience, and, above all, to honor an extraordinary woman." There was applause. Lady Eleanor, seated at the table, maintained a serene expression, though her fingers were tightly intertwined in her lap. "My mother, Lady Eleanor Alistair, is the reason I am here today. She taught me everything I know about business, about integrity, about dignity. When my father left us over 30 years ago, leaving only debts and shame, it was she who held her head high and said we would survive. And not just survive, but prosper." Raphael paused, letting the words resonate through the silent hall. "Together, we built Alistair Construction from scratch. Every brick, every contract, every victory was achieved with sweat, honesty, and hard work. My mother always said that the most important thing wasn't how much money we earned, but how we earned it. That our name had to mean something. That trust was the most precious asset a family could have." Camilla and Luke exchanged nervous glances. There was something in Raphael's tone, an intensity that hadn't been there before. "A few months ago, my mother suffered a terrible accident. Many of you know the story. She fell, severely injuring herself. When I arrived home that night, I found her lying on the veranda alone in the cold rain. It was one of the worst moments of my life." Raphael let emotion show in his voice, saw how people in the hall leaned forward, absorbed by the story. "But today she is here with us, stronger than ever. And tonight is not just a celebration of her recovery, it is also a night of truths, because my mother taught me that the truth, no matter how painful, must always come to light." It was then that Raphael gave a signal, and the large screen behind him lit up. The first image that appeared was an old photo, a young Lady Eleanor smiling, holding a child Raphael in her lap. There were appreciative murmurs from the audience. "We've prepared a video in tribute to my mother. I hope everyone appreciates it." The presentation began. Old family photos, happy moments, the company's construction. The background music was emotional, touching. People watched with nostalgic smiles, some discreetly wiping away tears. And then subtly the nature of the video began to change. The photos gave way to more recent images: the family mansion, the equestrian center, the veranda where Lady Eleanor had been found. The music stopped. What followed was audio, a voice recording, Camilla's voice. "She knows too much. That meddling old woman isn't content to just stay quiet. Now she wants to audit everything, control everything." The hall grew tense. People looked at each other, confused. Camilla paled, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Luke was frozen, his eyes fixed on the screen. And then came Luke's voice. "She's always been like that. Controlling. Thinks she knows everything." Raphael remained on stage motionless, watching the video along with everyone else. The audio continued, revealing increasingly incriminating conversations. The planning of the accident, the discussion about how to make Lady Eleanor seem confused and incapacitated, the clear admission that they intended to harm her. "No," Camilla whispered at the table, abruptly standing up. Her chair fell backward with a crash that echoed through the now completely silent hall. "This isn't real. This was edited. It's a lie." But the video didn't stop. Images from the Equestrian Centre's security cameras appeared on the screen. Clear, sharp, impossible to deny. They showed Camilla and Luke leading Lady Eleanor to the ramp. They showed the moment Camilla simply turned the wheelchair, making Lady Eleanor fall violently to the ground. They showed how they left her there and walked away. Shouts of horror echoed through the hall. Someone cried that it was absurd. Others stood up, looking at Camilla and Luke with expressions of shock and revulsion. Luke tried to run, but security guards were already positioned at the exits. Robert had planned every detail. The video continued. Now it showed the testimonies. Joseph, the gardener, recounting what he had seen. Martha, the former caregiver, crying as she revealed the conversation she had overheard. Her guilt for not protecting Lady Eleanor. Documents appeared on the screen. The fraudulent property transfers, the forged signatures, the records of money embezzlement. And then came the most recent recordings. Camilla and Luke celebrating, thinking they had fooled Raphael. Talking about how predictable he was, how his weakness was to forgive. Planning what they would do if Lady Eleanor started talking too much. "If she starts talking too much, we can always say she's confused." Luke's voice came from the loudspeakers. "Elderly people get confused. No one will take it seriously." "And if they do?" Another pause, longer this time. "Then we'll have to think of another solution, a permanent one." The hall erupted. People screaming, some crying, others simply in shock. Journalists ran to make calls. Cameras were already recording everything. There was pure indignation in the air, a collective revolt against what everyone had just witnessed. Raphael finally spoke again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "My wife and my brother not only tried to get rid of my mother, they planned it, executed it, and then they tried to cover it up. They forged documents to steal her properties, they embezzled money from the company, and when they thought they had gotten away with it, they planned to do the same to me." Camilla was crying now, tears streaming down her carefully applied makeup. She tried to approach Raphael, her hands extended in supplication. "Raphael, please. I was confused. I didn't mean to. It was Luke who convinced me. I love you. Please think about our baby." "Our baby?" Raphael repeated, his voice icy. "You mean Luke's child? The baby you planned to use to secure an inheritance, even knowing it wasn't mine?" Camilla froze, her face disfigured by shock. How did he know? How did he know? Everything. There was movement at the hall's entrance. Detective Patricia Miller entered, accompanied by a team of police officers. She walked to the main table with professional determination. "Camilla Rodriguez Allister and Luke Henry Allister, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." It was chaos. Luke tried to argue, to shout that there was a mistake, but he was quickly handcuffed. Camilla collapsed to the floor, sobbing, begging for forgiveness that would not come. The police officers lifted them and escorted them out of the hall, while cameras captured every second. Raphael descended from the stage and went to his mother. Lady Eleanor was crying, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of justice finally achieved. Raphael knelt beside her wheelchair and hugged his mother. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the scandal, not the money, not the betrayal. Just the two of them, together, as they had always been. "Dear mother," he whispered, "it's over. You're safe now." Lady Eleanor held her son's face in her trembling hands and with great effort uttered the words she had been trying to say for weeks, "My son, my hero." The guests, even shocked, began to applaud. Slowly at first, then growing in volume and intensity. It was not an applause of celebration, but of respect. Respect for a son who had fought for his mother, for a truth that had been exposed, for justice that had been served in the most public and undeniable way possible. The days that followed were turbulent. The story dominated all of Winchester's newspapers and quickly spread throughout England. The headlines were sensational but accurate. Businessman unmasks wife and brother at gala dinner. Family conspiracy. Exposed attempted murder against elderly woman. Raphael Alistair's well-planned vengeance. But Raphael didn't see it as vengeance. He saw it as justice. The criminal proceedings against Camilla and Luke were swift. With so much evidence, so well documented and publicly exposed, there was no room for legal maneuvers or challenges. Both were convicted. Luke received 5 years in prison for conspiracy, fraud, document forgery, and attempted murder. Camilla, pregnant, received a semi-open prison regime, but lost absolutely all rights to the Alistair family's assets. The divorce proceedings were finalized in a matter of weeks. The baby was born 6 months after the scandal. A girl. Camilla, without resources and socially ostracized, handed custody over to her parents who lived in the English countryside. Raphael never saw the child. It wasn't his responsibility. It wasn't his daughter. She was an innocent victim of her parents' choices, but not part of his life. Lady Eleanor fully recovered over the following months. Physical therapy worked wonders, and eventually she was able to walk again with the aid of a cane. Her speech returned completely, and with it came renewed strength. She had survived the worst, and it had made her even more resilient. Raphael transformed the family estate into something significant. He converted part of the mansion and all the surrounding land into a care centre for vulnerable elderly people. Eleanor's Haven, as it was named, offered housing, medical care, physical therapy, and free psychological assistance to elderly individuals who had been abandoned, neglected, or abused by their families. Lady Eleanor became the project's ambassador. She travelled throughout the country giving talks, telling her story, encouraging other elderly people to report abuse, to not be afraid to speak up. Her most famous phrase, repeated in interviews and events, was, "I was hurt by those who pretended to love me, but saved by the one who never stopped being my son." Pain can destroy us or strengthen us. I chose strength. Raphael and Lady Eleanor's story inspired change. The case led to the creation of more rigorous laws for the protection of the elderly in England. Specialized police units were established. National awareness campaigns were launched. What began as a family tragedy became a movement of social transformation. Raphael never remarried. He focused his efforts on the construction company, which prospered even more under his ethical and transparent leadership, and on Eleanor's Haven, which expanded to other cities. He found purpose not in profit, but in the positive impact he could have on other people's lives. As for Camilla and Luke, their lives took paths opposite to what they had planned. Luke served his sentence in a prison in Winchester, far from the spotlight and the power he once thought would be his. When he was released, he moved to another city, another county, trying to start anew, far from the shame he carried as a permanent shadow. Camilla never socially recovered. The city that had once welcomed her with red carpets now closed its doors to her. Her old friends avoided her. No prestigious job would accept her. She lived modestly with her parents, working simple jobs, forever carrying the weight of the choices she had made. Years after the scandal, Raphael was sitting on the veranda of Eleanor's Haven, the same veranda where he had once found his mother fallen and suffering. But now it was a place of peace. Elderly residents laughed and chatted around, attentive caregivers circulated, the garden was in bloom and vibrant. Lady Eleanor, now 83, sat beside her son. She was still agile, still strong, still the matriarch who commanded respect. "You did more than save me, son. You transformed our pain into hope for so many others," she said, looking around with pride. "You were the one who taught me that, from the worst experiences, we can draw the greatest lessons," Raphael responded, taking his mother's hand, "and that the most powerful revenge is not to destroy those who harmed us, but to build something so good that their wicked actions seem insignificant in comparison." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the Winchester sky with shades of orange and pink. The city continued its routine, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding in its streets. But for Raphael and Lady Eleanor, that moment represented something greater than justice or revenge. It represented overcoming, transformation, and proof that even in the darkest moments, true love and integrity always find a way to prevail. The story of the Alistair family became legendary in Winchester and beyond. Not for the wealth they accumulated, nor for the scandals they faced, but for the way they chose to respond to betrayal and cruelty. They chose justice instead of violent revenge. They chose transformation instead of bitterness. They chose to use their pain to light the way for others who suffered in silence. And when Raphael was asked years later if he regretted anything, how he had handled everything, he always gave the same answer. "I don't regret seeking justice, but I am prouder of what we did afterward. My mother taught me that our true strength is not in how we punish our enemies, but in how we protect the vulnerable. And that is what we will continue to do for all the years we have left." Lady Eleanor lived to be 92, lucid and active until her last days. When she finally passed away, it was in peace, surrounded by her son, by countless elderly people whose lives she had touched, and by the legacy of love and justice she left behind. Her funeral was one of the largest Winchester had ever seen, not for its pomp, but for the number of ordinary people who came to pay tribute to the woman who had become a symbol of dignity and resistance. Raphael continued his mother's work, expanding Eleanor's haven to 15 different cities. Each unit carried Lady Eleanor's portrait at the entrance with the inscription, "Strength is, not in never falling, but in always getting up." The story ended not with bitterness or hatred, but with hope. The hope that families can choose love instead of greed. The hope that elderly people are protected and valued. The hope that, even when confronted with the worst imaginable betrayal, we can still choose to build something beautiful from the ashes of pain. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all, that true justice is not just punishing the guilty, but transforming suffering into something that prevents others from going through the same. That honor is not in how much money we accumulate, but in how we use our power to protect the most fragile. That family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty, love, and integrity. Raphael Alistair never saw himself as a hero. He saw himself merely as a son who loved his mother and who did what anyone should do: protect those he loved most and seek justice when it was violated. But for the thousands of elderly people who found refuge, dignity, and a second chance at Eleanor's haven, he was much more than that. He was living proof that there are still good people in the world, people willing to fight for what is right, no matter the personal cost. And so the story that began with betrayal, pain, and despair ended with redemption, hope, and transformation. A story that would continue to inspire future generations to choose the harder but nobler path, the path of justice, compassion, and love that never gives up. Dear listeners, we hope Raphael and Lady Eleanor's story has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of pain, justice, and overcoming, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out most to you in this story. Was it Lady Eleanor's strength, Raphael's determination, the moment of revelation at the dinner? We want to know your opinion. Every day, we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, showing that even in the most difficult situations, dignity and true love always find a way. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on what truly matters in life. See you soon.